to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Before I introduce my guest, I would like to thank our sponsor, Kravet Inc. You know, at WindowWorks, we have been with Kravet since the early 1980s. Very first fabric account I ever opened, right? And through all these years, we have enjoyed their commitment to quality, relationship, and reliability. If you have not opened your trade account yet at Kravet, go to kravet.com and get started today. Fabric, wallpaper, trim, rugs, furniture, accessories, and more. No minimums, no hassle, all the good things. Kravet.com. All right, so I am delighted to tell you that Jude Charles is back with us today. Jude is the video brand strategist who joined us on episode 516 to give us the 10,000-foot view of the whys and hows of video. Then Jude came back on episode 626 to walk us through the first stage of his storytelling framework, using me as a guinea pig, right there live on air. It was pretty funny. All right, for me anyway. There was so much more to cover after our last conversation that we decided to press pause and have him come back. So Jude agreed, and here he is, walking us through the second stage of his storytelling framework, dramatic demonstration. Let's hear Jude tell us how we can take the story we've discovered about our brand in stage 1 and now demonstrate it in stage 2 through video. Hey, Jude, thanks so much for joining me again on A Well-Designed Business.
Thank you for having me, LuAnn. It is definitely a pleasure to be back on the show and to go deeper in our series of conversations. This time we're talking about dramatic demonstration.
I know. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 2 shows that you've been on the show, and I just love it. I just love, I just am so attracted to anyone who is really good at what they do and really can explain it well. Like, that's just like that little unicorn. It's like, oh, you're good at it and you can make me understand it too. And that's you. You really do break down storytelling in a way that I think, at least for me, makes sense. And I'm like, oh, right? So I'm so excited. And if you are new to the show and you haven't heard the first 2 episodes, we'll put the episodes in the show notes. I highly encourage you to go back and listen to them. We're going to pick it up from those 2 shows. To some extent, you will want to go back and listen. But Jude, why don't you recap a little of what we've covered just so that somebody who's new to us today has some context for where we're going to take dramatic demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely. So in episode 516, we talked generally about storytelling, right? And I introduced the idea of storytelling, why it's important, and how to go about road mapping your own story to tell to someone else and to bring it to life. Then in the second episode that I was featured on, 626, I actually did something really fun, you and I, LuAnn, where I got to interview you, and we dug into 2 different stories. So the first one was your why as to why you started this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. It was the email from Mary Fran. And then the second story we dug deep into was a behind the scenes story of what it's like to work with your client. Because I think you said something on that episode of like your client, you saying to your client that you'll do whatever it takes to figure out a problem, figure out the solution to their problem. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, let's go deeper into that. Tell me a story when you actually had to do that. And you brought up the story of the black, blue, and green pen. Mm-hmm. Your system for taking notes, because there was this one time that, it fell through the cracks and you and another vendor weren't on the same page, and so you had to create this system for making sure that everything gets done right, right? And so
Right.
that's where we left off is those two stories. And in this episode, I want to talk through. Okay, we got really clear because that part is called dramatic clarity. We got really clear on these things that are important to you, why you got started with the podcast, and why you believe in integrity. But how do we bring that to life? How do we show someone and not just tell them that these things are important to you?
And I remember just before we do go to this next step today, I remember having that aha when you asked me why do I do something, what's my philosophy on doing something, and yes, I remember giving you the answer, and you're like, okay, but let's pull it apart and tell me a story where you lived that principle, basically, is sort of what you did, right? And
Yeah,
what,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? And what was funny is I had a search for a moment. I'm like, okay, let's figure out which story I might, use to express that. But what was interesting is that's where your genius comes in, because I would have just like, there's the story, but then you were like, and this is where we take this and we, really start to create this into something that we can create a story around that will go to the stranger consumer to bring them into your world and say, this is what it's like when you work with LuAnn and her company. And that little tidbit was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that sort of where we pick it up today, how you take that information and, I guess to your point, we're going to demonstrate for the outside world what my company's values are and the way we do things. And we're going to demonstrate it in a video. Is that where we're at today?
Yeah, that's where we're at. I
Okay.
mean, the whole point, the whole idea is that why you would even go through this process is that you're road mapping this out to understand how do you attract the right client, right? And so first you got to get really clear about who you are and what you stand for, what you represent. But today we'll take that, because at that point it's still just words. We'll take those words and we'll talk about how to bring it to life in the form of a video, and more than anything, how do you connect that with the client that you want to work with?
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we start? What do we do?
All right. So picking up where we left off with your story, right? I want to actually do the black, blue, and green pen because that's where we left off in the last episode.
Okay.
And I talked about how we would start that story with that black, blue, and green pen because you want a hook in that video. You don't want to just come in with, hey, I'm LuAnn and this is who we are, this is what we do, but you want to come in with this hook that intrigues the person into this moment, right? Because the story is about a very specific moment in time. And one of the 5 dramatic demonstrations that I like to talk about is one that's called live illustration. And live illustration, oftentimes it's not like a behind the scenes where you get to see yourself working with a client, but a live illustration is where you take this object and like a black, blue, or green pen, and you hook that person into the object, into them understanding that this object means so much more than what you think it means. Like, of course, you meet with an interior designer, or you meet with anybody, a consultant of any kind, they're going to take notes. But why it's important for you to take notes, like we talked about in the last episode, is because one of your vulnerabilities is that you aren't that great at being detail oriented. So
Right.
you have to do this. You have to do it in order to make sure that the client is happy.
Right.
And so you created this system, and that's what we'll start the video talking about.
It's
Yeah.
I remember you saying at the end of that show, and that's where I would start the video with these 3 pens, and I was like, oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think what it is, Jude, is that the major aha for me on this is, and I know you're going to be like, duh, LuAnn, that's the whole point, I have a business, is that if I were watching a movie that opened up with 3 pens on a table or a piece of paper or whatever, I would immediately be like, why are there 3 different color pens? Like, what's going to happen here? Like, what does this have to do with the people that I'm going to see next? Like you said, it's an immediate hook. Like, what do the pens have to do with, Sally goes to, Bupkis, right? You know what I'm saying? But like, the thing is that what you do is you teach people to take that same approach to creating video for their business. And that was the boom moment. I was like, oh, because yes, if somebody has ever said to me, LuAnn, make your own storyboard for a video for WindowWorks, I'd be like, oh, first we have to start by saying, we're so detail orientated here. We make sure we do this. And it's like, and that is what you're saying. The dramatic demonstration is the key in what you teach people to do. It's the taking that other level look at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way I like to put it is hearing something said 1,000 times is not as powerful as seeing it once. Right? And I'll say it again because I think it's a very important point. Hearing something said 1,000 times, like you just said, we're very detail oriented. Hearing that said 1,000 times is not as powerful as seeing it once, because when you see it, you believe it. There is so much truth in the saying, the old cliche saying, seeing is believing. And that is where this whole dramatic demonstration of proof idea comes from, is that we don't just want to talk about things. Like, it's important to say it, right? But it's important to show it as well. And everything that you say, in my opinion, must be shown as well, so that the viewer, the client that you're looking to attract, or even if it's like, another vendor that you're looking to work with, it's more important for them to know who you are other than just what you can do, because there's literally hundreds and thousands of other people that can do what you do. But how do you stand out and show them who you are at a core level, and then get them to believe it before they ever meet with you?
Yeah, it's very powerful. And it's funny because we have recognized this over the many, many episodes of the podcast when it comes to writing the copy on our website. And I get that the hearing and seeing the word isn't as powerful as this. But the analogy in my mind is the same, because I have noticed when I read designers' website copy, and we've talked often about, if you come from a field of finance, and you, like, I remember back Erica Ward, oh my goodness, I think she was episode 6 or 9 or something. And she talked about how she came from a field where she was the project manager on, I want to say, multi-million-dollar construction projects. Like, I could be making that part up, you know me with numbers, right? But what it is that now, as a residential interior designer, when you are going to work on my project, whether it's a $10,000 or $100,000 project, if I can visualize that you had to manage like construction projects that were multiple 6 figures, like, I'm like, you got this. You're not going to run around in circles and not be out of budget with my project. And so it's sort of that. It's like, don't just tell me I'm good with budgets. Tell me why I'm good with managing budgets. And you're saying take it a step further and create a video story that now makes it that seeing is believing element, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's a great example, because episode 516, which is the first time I was on the show, we talked about William Molesky, the interior designer that I actually created a docuseries for, a brand campaign for. And his campaign was exactly that. It wasn't just talking about how great he was or the team that he works with, how great they are. It was showing his entire process from beginning to end. He has an 8-step process. He doesn't have a specific name for it outside of that, but it's 8 steps. And what we did is we showed what those 8 steps would look like in a 10-minute video. One of the videos was 10 minutes, and we showed what each of those steps would look like in the process, right? And so it's the exact same thing that you're talking about, which is, it's not just talking about it. It's not just saying that you're great at managing these high-level projects, but how do I see that? And one of the ways I would want to see that is to see one of those high-level projects. I would want to see, if, let's say hypothetically it's a commercial building that's going up in New York, right? And you are the interior designer for that project, or you're the contractor for that project. What are you doing? What is your role, and why is it special that you are the person that is working on that project, right? Like, there are hundreds of other people that could be chosen for that project, but why you? And that is the most important question. Like, if you're listening to this, you haven't heard the other episodes, the whole point of this is, why should I do business with you versus any and every other option available to me? And that is what we're doing in helping you roadmap this out so that you answer it for yourself.
Right. And what I remember is your particular ability to ask the questions, at least of me, it was 100% borne out, ask the questions that really help both you and the person you're working with get to that why you. That was interesting, right? I never, if anybody ever said to me, tell me why a designer should feel comfortable or rely on WindowWorks for their, high detailed, high profile projects. Well, I've got a green, black, and red and green, black, and blue pen system. I would never say that. Right? So taking that, where do we go next? Is it like, today, are you going to walk through maybe what the storyboard of that video would look like, or where do we go?
I think so. I had some time to think about this, and I think what is fascinating to me is not just because one thing you talked about with the Mary Fran story and starting this podcast is that there was a bigger vision. You had already been doing the Windows treatment business for a long time, and you were driving home that day, and you thought to yourself, like, there's so much more than just this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you felt a deeper calling for what you were doing in your life. And I think what I want to walk through, I talked about a little bit about the red, blue, and black. I'm sorry, the
blue, black, and green.
Yeah, green pen. But I think, how does that tie into this bigger purpose and this journey that you're on now? So I'm going to set out this vision, and I think we could break this down, and you could tell me what you think about it. But what I do on a day-to-day basis, before we logged on to and started recording, I mentioned that I'm working on a big project now, big docuseries project with a client. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I bring these documentary series to life for clients. This specific client is a business coach, but I've done it for an interior designer and other people. And what I want to do is do the same thing for you. So I want to break down what this docuseries could look like for you, LuAnn, but specifically for this podcast. Let's say hypothetically you were on a mission to grow this podcast. You've done over 600 episodes at this point, and you've been doing this podcast for years, but you want to grow it and you want people to feel connected to LuAnn. Let's say they've never heard the podcast before, but you want them to feel connected to you. To me, I see this as a 3-part video series.
First, can I just say to you?
Yes.
Yeah, let's pretend that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it would be, in my mind, it would be a 3-part video series, right? And the first part would be your history of being a successful entrepreneur, running the Windows treatment business. But again, we're starting with this black, blue, and green pen because this black, blue, and green pen is a lesson that you had to learn as you were building your business. A mistake happened. You and an interior designer you weren't on the same page, and then you basically had to pay for it on the back end because these mistakes were made and you had to go back and do it all over again. Mm-hmm. But what that did is that day that you were driving home and realizing, like, there's so much more that I could be doing. There's so much more I could be teaching to other people. You realize that this system can translate into a podcast to help others build their successful businesses. But again, we're starting the video 1, with just talking about this system and talking about the big day that it happened where you realized your why was so much bigger, right? You wanted to help others line up the right dominoes so they can fall in love with what they're doing. Because the business side of this, you're working with creatives and people who are creatives, and the business side of this can really sap your energy and sap the creative juices that you have going for you. But if you can learn how to run the business, a well-designed business, then you can grow your business and continue to love what you do. So that's video 1. Video 2 is the day that you start the podcast. Hypothetically, we would go back in time, would reenact the way that you started the podcast business. And then the emails start flooding in. And this is the day that you get the email from Mary Fran. And she's giving you feedback on the show. And this is the day you finally feel like you're doing the work that you were called to do. And this is the big why. Why does it matter? And then maybe if we really want to get creative, we do video testimonials with people that have listened to the podcast and how their lives have changed listening to the podcast, how their businesses have grown listening to the podcast. Because it's not just enough for you to talk about how great the podcast is, but how others can talk about how great the podcast is. And then video number 3 would be the transformation. It would be the vision for the future. Okay, you've done this for X amount of years. You've done 600 episodes. You've even continued this show and did a very well event throughout the pandemic. But here's what the future looks like. Here's the vision of the future and where you're taking the podcast next, and why people should tune in and continue to listen and continue to be fans of the Well-Designed Business Podcast. That whole idea, those 3 videos came from episode 626, just listening to you telling me about your big why.
Wow.
Me listening to you tell me about, the systems that it was just one system, and we only spent an hour. I normally do these road mapping sessions as 8 hours. And so if I were to get more stories, then there's more ideas that would come in, but that's just a 1-hour session that I did with you, listening to you, going deeper into your big why, and then thinking about how we create these 3 videos to help you fulfill a bigger mission. It's not just about, getting more people to listen to the podcast, but how can you help more people to grow their business? All of that came from episode 626. And one last thing I want to say before we move on is that there are these 5 demonstrations, and I didn't point them out as I was telling this layout, but I'll point it out now. There's these 5 demonstrations. There's behind the scenes, there's a live illustration, there's social proof, there's unique mechanism, and then transformation. And those are the 5 that I always look for in any docuseries that I create. And I literally just laid that out. We can break it down in a second, but I literally just laid that out within this layout that I just gave you here.
Wow. So, all right, sign me up, okay? You're no fool, Jude. I'm just going to say. All right, so now I have 2 ways that I want to go. First thing I want to know is, do we want to talk about examples of what the 5 demonstrations are? Is that worthwhile for us to talk about? Or I'm also curious, it's funny because I get curious about 2 things. What is the finished product like? Like when I think about, for a designer, I love that you used me as the guinea pig, by the way, because that's like, free research, right? For me. But for a designer listening, if they were to come up with the 3 different video series too, right? But these are not documentaries. This is not going to be a 2-hour long thing. Each of these videos, Jude, do you visualize them as 1 minute? Are they 20 minutes? Like what kind of length are they that you are really building these stories out of it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so for me personally, when I'm creating these docuseries, I like to do 20 to 30 minute episodes. Now
Okay.
that doesn't mean for a listener that they have to do that. You can do 3 to 5 minute episodes starting out. I like to do 20 to 30 minutes because normally the clients that I'm working with are entrepreneurs who are running 7-figure businesses. They've been in it for a while, over 10 years, and they have a longer story to tell. They have a lot of content to capture. And so that's why I like to do 20 to 30 minutes. But I actually want to shout out one of your listeners that is running an interior design studio. They didn't work with me, but I've been in contact with them before. And Janie and JP running Studio 818 has actually started to do their own videos.
Oh.
And so, and I watched 2 of them. They put them out on Instagram, and I watched 2 of them. And I want to say the first one was maybe 3 minutes long. The second one was 2 minutes long. But in my opinion, it doesn't have to be long. It just has to tell the right story. That's the whole point, is how do you go deeper and tell the right story? And so to me, that's how, it's not about length. Because some people will say, well, no one wants to watch 20 minutes of me, which is not true. Because, again, I've been doing this for years and I've proven that. But it's not so much that no one wants to watch a longer video. It's the fact that can you make it interesting enough? How do you take something that may feel mundane to you and make it exciting? It's through storytelling. It's through these dramatic demonstrations. It's through pulling back the curtain to show someone what it's really like. And that's why I love documentaries. Because documentaries, you're not faking it. You're showing what real life looks like, especially when it matters most, which is working with you and hiring you and giving you money.
So when you visualize this concept, and you have the 3 color pens, is it opens out with the three pens on a white table or something, and then as you transition to each document, are you then, is that what you're doing? The three pens, you're having them correlate to but no, because that's a different story. The three pens was window work story.
It's
Although
still a
it's
window
all
work
my
story.
story, though. That's the thing. What you're
Exactly. It's all
saying
you can
is,
see. And I want listeners to pay attention to what's happening, because LuAnn is even figuring this out because she's realizing the power of it. And that's, I
yeah,
think you mentioned a very important point. It's all your story. You're still the person that created WindowWorks.
right.
You're still the person, even though you've transitioned into doing this podcast business, you still are the person that created this. And this is where the podcast was birthed, because if you didn't do WindowWorks,
right.
you wouldn't have the podcast.
Oh no, that's the truth. You're the sum of everything you've done. Like
Right.
I think I even might have said in that show that we talked about this, that, in my 30s and my 40s, I thought and imagined and pined to do something that was other than and in addition to selling window treatments, but I didn't know what it was and I couldn't put a finger on it. But if I hadn't spent 35 years doing window treatments and building a business with my husband and our cousin, I never could have had the conversations that I've had on the show. I never would have had the idea for it. And one of the things that people say is, you ask the question in my head, you ask the deeper questions, you get to the thing. And that's because that was, now it's 40, but that was 35 years of being a business person like the listener and understanding either ahead of the listener what we're really going to talk about here, because as soon as I hear somebody say something, I'm like, I know this happened. And other times it's genuine curiosity, like, I've never come across that in all this time. What does that mean? But somebody could have handed me a podcast when I was 25 and I would have talked, and I probably would have been a little bit funny, but it would have been boring as heck because I wouldn't have had enough experience and material, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. So let me ask you this. Are you still in the business day to day? Are you still in WindowWorks?
Well, I wasn't until COVID came and it won't leave.
I asked that because you asked me like how it would start the video, and it would be the black, blue, and green pen, but it would go from the black, blue, and green pen on the table to seeing you working behind the scenes with the black, blue, and green pen.
Fun.
You working in WindowWorks is the whole point of why this podcast started. And so let's see that in real life. You working with a client and the notes that you're taking with this black, blue, and green pen. What does each pen represent? Why are you using these different colors? Let's actually see that in real life. And that's where I would go behind the scenes and like follow you for a day as you're working with a client, as you're doing a walkthrough. That would be the behind the scenes dramatic demonstration. That would be hearing how you're asking the client questions, or like I said, seeing you actually writing down on a notepad. Like that would be the behind the scenes part of it.
Interesting.
The pens are the live illustration because those are the objects, and then the social proof would come from the video testimonials. That's later on in a different video, but that would come from the video testimonials of people talking about listening to the podcast. Even some people being on the podcast. Like, why is this podcast special? Your audience is special, right? Like before we started recording, I talked about how in the last episode I released an early version of my book, and 25 people signed up to get the early version of the book. Like that to me is special.
Right.
That people are not just listening, but they're willing to be invested into getting a book and reading the book, right? Mm-hmm. And so that would be video testimony. Social proof is, what do other people have to say? Not just what you have to say, but what do other people have to say? And then the unique mechanism goes back to the black, blue, and green pen. It also goes to you, the person, LuAnn, because without you hosting this podcast, people wouldn't listen, in my opinion. Like, you are a very interesting character and you truly are passionate about what you do. So we would want to show that. We would want to show your characteristics and not just the black, blue, and green pen. And then finally, the transformation. The transformation is the transformation of your clients. I'm sorry, not your clients, but, well, your clients too. It's actually a trifold of transformations. It's the transformation of your clients with WindowWorks, the transformation of your listeners, but also the transformation of this podcast, because the route that I took is that this would be the vision for where the podcast is going in the future. Right? The community that you're building and where it's going in the future. And so there would be a 3-part to even just that, the transformation. But again, this is why, in my opinion, it's so important to show this because let's say hypothetically each of these videos were 5 minutes long, right? That's 15 minutes for someone to watch a 3-part video series instead of having to listen to over 600 episodes to get them invested into, or even just one episode. One episode is an hour long. Instead of them listening to 1 hour episode to get invested into listening to your podcast, now they've listened to 15, 20, maybe even 30 minutes. They've watched these videos and now they're much more invested because they get to understand the deeper why, right? And
so true.
it's hard to get that. It's hard to get that with one episode, but that's why I like series, and that's why I do the work that I do, because I understand the business end of it. I understand that it's not just creating a cool video for the sake of creating a cool video. It's about telling your story and getting people connected to you on a deeper level.
Well, and I love this. I love this personally, by the way, but I also love this because I can visualize it for an interior designer as well, right? In other words, it's, to me, what I just heard in there is when you said somebody can listen, can find out about your podcast. It could be a brand new idea to them. They can listen to one episode and maybe it's a good episode. Maybe I was doing my A game that day. The guest was great. And they're like, I want more, right? So for a designer, to me, the correlation is someone finds your website and they look at your portfolio and they think, I like that. But if there is something on the website, a video like this, a series, a 2 or 3 parts video series like this, where, look, the designers listen. I make fun of them all the time. You guys know how much I love you. But I do. I make fun all the time. Don't tell me on your website that you're inspired by the dunes and beaches. Like, it makes my eyes roll over, okay? However, it is a tongue-in-cheek jab at them, okay? Because really a creative who is connected to their passion is the creative you want to do business with, right? And so if you really are dramatically connected to the beach and the ocean and the grasses for all the emotional reasons, and that would be part of the video, right? And now it's not just I love the beach and I love the breezes, you know what I mean? And then we have our designers who are very committed to sustainability and to, how about Deborah Deborah Rosenberg? She is committed to vegan design, right? And when you watch a video of Deborah telling you why she is committed to vegan design, it's so much more powerful than just going to her website and being like, oh, she does vegan design. I'm into veganism, and maybe I should think of this in my house. And so I love that because that is the place for a designer to connect the passion that brought them to design to that intersection of then speaking to that client, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, it's not just talking about it, but like bring me into that moment. Like if you got inspired through, what did you say, the dunes and beaches? Is that what you said?
That's what I say all the time.
If you got inspired by that, well, tell me the day. Tell me the day that maybe your mom took you to the beach that day, and it really just sparked something in you, right? Like, right. I go back to because I love your listeners and because we have somewhat built a relationship. I go back to Jane and JP that I talked about earlier, and this isn't a video that they did, but they made a post on Instagram, and it was a cute post, but it again took me deeper. And Jane talked about like, am I the only one that puts garlic into everything? Right? It has nothing to do with interior design, right? But it made me feel connected to who she was, right? But there's also, they have a customer testimonial video where there's a bunch of different customers and their clients in their video. And there's one that talks about one of the reasons they chose to work with that couple is because they are a husband and wife couple. And that spoke to them. Right? But again, there's like, then in one of their videos, they talk about the day that they started the business because JP is the contractor in the business. And I believe Jane is the interior designer. But how do they make that work? And all of that, like bringing me into that moment that they decided we're going to do this business together. And this is how we know we make it work, that we complement each other, because it's not easy to work together as a husband and wife team. Right. But all of that tells your story. And so once you start to tell that story and then you put visuals behind that, you bring me into that moment and you put the visuals behind that. That's what's the most important piece is don't just tell it to me. Don't just, sit in front of a camera and talk, but how do you create the visuals for it, if you're gonna say you're inspired by the beach and dunes, and you know that everyone else says that, take me to the beach.
Right.
Take me to the beach and help me to feel and experience the same moment that you felt and experienced. Even though we can't recreate it like the day that it happened, but just like I talked with that day that you got the email from Mary Fran, well, let's take me back into that moment, right?
Right.
Where
right.
I could sit with you and I could turn on the camera and I could say, you know what, LuAnn, read that email to me again. And I can hope, what I'm hoping for is that as you read it, it sparks that same level of energy that it did the first day that you read it.
Yes. And it would. It absolutely would.
And I've done that before. I've had a client read an email and she cried while she was reading the email because she remembered the same feel. But again, you're recreating it, but it's also still real life as it happens, and it makes you feel more connected to the moment now all over again.
Right.
Even as I'm watching it, I feel connected to the moment all over again. That's what dramatic demonstration of proof is all about. Like, show me, don't just tell me, show me, and find ways to show me. Sometimes I get that video is difficult and sometimes it's hard to create a video, but even through a picture, like a picture is worth 1,000 words. Take a picture that brings me into that moment so that as you're looking to work with me, as you're saying, hey, I want to work with you as a client, how do I feel connected to you? Why should I do business with you versus any and every other option available?
Mm. And the thing is, to your point with mentioning JP and Jane, is that, yes, okay, so if you are a fairly established business and you can think about hiring somebody like Jude to do this for you, great, but you can take this into the little things that you do in your Instagram lives and your Facebook lives. It's just really just like what I keep hearing you say is that what you do and how you do it and what makes something in your process special is take it to the moment of that. And that is very powerful to think because we're looking for this, I don't know what, that we think we're supposed to put on the video and go live about, right? Like I'm always like, well, what the heck am I going to talk about? You know what I mean? But it's like find a moment. It's like a simple moment. And that, I have to say, for me, I don't come to it knowledgeably, but when I finally do it, I'm like, LuAnn, picture one person who wrote you one email that has a problem. And I'm like, just talk about that one problem, because if one person has the problem, other people have it. And so that was my lesser informed way of getting through a moment. But I feel like that's kind of what you're doing. It's like, take us to a moment.
Yeah. And it could be multiple moments, right? Like in the last episode, we talked about the email from Mary Fran, but we also talked about you in the car. I think you stopped at a stop sign or you were at a red light, and then that moment hit you like, is this what's going to be read on my tombstone? Right? Like, that moment to me is powerful to stop and think, is this what's going to be read on my tombstone? Right.
That was, you know what it was? That was a little different. The memory of that, the actual explanation of that memory is that it wasn't, is this what's going to be on my tombstone? It was like, oh, what's going to be in my obituary, my tombstone.
Oh, obituary, right.
But like before, it was like I would always be like, is this it for me? Like, she sold blinds, like that's it. Like LuAnn Nigara is dead. She sold blinds. But what happened was I had just left that customer that after I thanked her for her order, she had been a repeat customer for many, many years. When I thanked her, she looked at me like, you don't have to thank me. I thank you. And I'm like, no, come on. I'm you know what? You call us every time you have a project. And I just want you to say, we talk about our kids and as they grow up. And, you know, I don't want you to ever think that I lose sight that, you know, you choose to do business with me over and over again. Thank you. And I was saying it because I meant it, but I wasn't like in this, you know, like kumbaya moment. I was just literally saying thank you. And that's when she went off. She was like, are you kidding me? She goes, who else would I use? She goes, you guys are the best. She goes, you know what? Every time I call Adriana this, and every time Billy comes out that, and you guys say you're going to come when you're going to come, and you keep me updated on the orders and all the things. And she goes, you know what? Blah blah. And I literally was like, oh. And then when I got in the car, I was like, she goes, and I've sent my sister-in-law to you, and I found out that my girlfriend at tennis uses you. Like, she went through this whole thing, Jude. And when I got in the car, I was like, oh, the obituary doesn't say she's dead, she sold blinds. The obituary says that she was part of a business that her and her husband and her cousin built over 40 or 50 or 60 years. And they were in the Livingston community, and they have done generations of families, from grandparents all the way down to great grandchildren. They've been the person that the company that's been chosen to do their window treatments. And I was like, oh, we're doing something really cool here. I'm not just selling blinds. That's what it was. And that was when I really appreciated my business. And that probably took 25 years to get to that point.
Yeah. But what I love about that is even you going back to tell that story, you feel the passion all over
Oh,
again.
I do. I'm like, this is great. Well, and now it's a new thing, because now we're getting ready for succession planning, and we're getting ready to have the next crew of people that have been working under us for many years. They're moving into management positions. They're moving into leadership positions. And it's just like, I get very excited when I turn around and I'm like, I don't know. What does Kim think about that? We have to get her approval. I'm like, yay. And it's like, it's exciting on a lot of levels. It's not exciting just because I don't have to make all the decisions and Vinny doesn't have to make all the decisions. It's exciting to see them step into their space now. And it's cool.
They can do it because they get a different understanding of what it is that WindowWorks represents, right? It's a deeper, like, what you believe in and why you believe in it is so much deeper because of that. Right? And I think overall, like, this is a masterclass on not just storytelling and going into a very specific moment in time. That's one part of it. But it's a masterclass on seeing it. Like, even as you're telling me the story, I can visualize you talking with the client and her telling, her excitement and in working with you over the years. And then now what it means to you to be able to do that it's morphed into this podcast business that you're now multiplying the amount of people that you are helping and transforming their lives, right? Like, it started in this small community in New Jersey that has now become really worldwide.
Right. Yes.
Like, that is the bigger picture, but that comes from that very specific moment in time that we would then take and then recreate in this video series. And that's why I call it dramatic demonstration. It's not just a demonstration. Like, anybody can do a demonstration. Right. I've shown that on the podcast. I'm here on the podcast and I'm doing demonstrations. But the dramatic part, the emotion, the feeling, the visualization of it, that's what makes it powerful and dramatic, is that I'm bringing you into this moment in time. I'm allowing you to feel this emotion with me, and that's what creates this deeper connection.
I love it. And, I thank you for the special gift of using me as the guinea pig, because it really is. It's very, very special. And it's enlightening and it's informative, and it really does help you as a business owner. And I want to say to our colleagues listening, think of the questions that he's asking me. Think of the things he's pulling out. Just do it for yourself, or hire Jude, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, you can take this, like you said, it's a masterclass in storytelling. You can, listen to it again and listen to it in a quiet moment instead of, while you're exercising or driving or all the things that we do when we listen to shows, right? And really challenge yourself to say, what is my moment? What is the moment that I knew I wanted to be an interior designer? And what would be that visual that is an interesting hook? You can kind of do it. I mean, I love for every show that I have, especially with the Power Talk Friday experts, is my criteria for a Power Talk Friday expert is come and teach my audience how to do it themselves if they want to. If somebody wants to hire you, yay, all day long. But I love when a Power Talk Friday expert actually does share enough information that with some effort, we can sit down and take the lessons into our own business. And I feel like you've done a really good job at that, Jude. Thank you.
No, I mean, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's what I love about it is, like I said, your listeners, they're not just listening to it, but they're actually taking action, and they're asking questions even, right? Like, and I think that's the most important piece. It's not to just listen to this. And I think you've made a great point of that in each of your episodes. It's not to just listen to it. It is to take action to grow your business and to show that it's possible.
Right.
I started this business 15 years ago, and I wish I had this. I didn't have that. I had to figure it out. Like you, I've had to figure out a lot of things on my own. But
Right.
I think the reason that I continue to give more and more and more to this community is because they are doing the work, and it's hard not to want to help people that are actually taking action and doing the work.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think it's awesome. And we have one more section left, right? After this, it's dramatic leverage. Is that what it is?
Dramatic leverage. So in the first part, episode 626, we talked about dramatic clarity. So how do you get really clear on your story, really clear on what you stand for? This episode, we talked about dramatic demonstration. So we got really clear, and then we brought that clarity to life. Dramatic leverage is then how do you actually make money from it? How do you share that story and attract the right client so that you're able to continue to grow your business? That's what dramatic leverage is. We'll talk about it, but there's over 70 different ways that you could leverage one video.
Whoa.
That's just one. And I've talked about creating a 3-part series, but that's just one video, right? To me, it's about doing all 3 together. It's getting really clear on your brand, dramatically demonstrating that brand, and then leveraging it. When you do those 3 things, that's when you can truly take and leverage the power of video storytelling. And that's what we'll talk about next.
That's amazing. I can't wait because, I'm so glad that there's that component of it because it's not a vanity project. I'm sure when you see your own video that you've made for people, I'm sure it feels like amazing. And okay, can I just show it to all my family and friends? This is awesome. Look at me. I'm fabulous. Right? My business is great. But that's the thing is, this is marketing. This is, you're intentionally, you're passionate about it. It's just like designers. They're passionate about creating a beautiful space, but they are actually technically doing it within all the great principles of design. The scale is right, the proportion is right, all the things. And for you, you're passionate about creating amazing videos that resonate and that demonstrate people's superpowers. But if those people don't use those videos then to leverage and maximize and gain clients from it, it's sort of like, what the heck, right? So I'm so thrilled that you have that component to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the most important piece. I think of the 3, like you can get really clear and create a video, but if no one sees it, like it's like that old saying, what is it? If a tree falls in the forest, but no one hears it, like that.
Right.
That to me is like,
it's like you and your mom are the only ones that watch the video. Yay.
Right. That's no good for you. I think it's important to understand how to market it. And, I think people just get hung up on like the whole entire process. And that's what I'm hoping to bring through this series is that even if you couldn't hire Jude Charles for a road mapping session, here's how you can do the roadmap on your own. And I think even in the next episode, I think by the time we have the next episode, I will create these list of questions and just give them to your audience for free. Like if you're looking to do this on your own and like there's something deeper, there's something there, you just haven't been able to take the time to do it, like, or you may not even know the right questions to ask. I will make that available by the time we have this next episode on dramatic leverage.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. That's so generous of you. And I know that's the little nudge that we need, right? It's like, sit and ask the questions. So good. Oh my goodness, Jude, you just blow my mind every time. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, to recap, Jude's 3-part storytelling framework starts with dramatic clarity, which is digging in deep to uncover the story. It moves to dramatic demonstration, showing the story through video, and then finishes with dramatic leverage, using the video to grow your business. Jude is already scheduled to come back to teach us about that final stage, dramatic leverage. So stay tuned for that episode in the coming weeks. Today, we work through dramatic demonstration, the second stage in his storytelling framework. At this stage, we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting. We've uncovered an intriguing story that is distinctive to us. Now, what we have to do is take that story and make something of it. It's time to make that video because seeing is believing. It's not enough to just have that story in your head. We have to make something out of it so others can get the story in their heads too. To demonstrate our story, Jude likes to use a documentary style 3-part video series where each video is 20 to 30 minutes long. And he says the videos must include 5 different ways of demonstrating the story to ensure the viewer gets a 360 view. The 5 strategic points he tells us to include in our brand video are going behind the scenes, using objects to illustrate and exemplify the main story element, social proof, testimonials, right? Unique mechanism, show something that is unique about you, and transformation, show how others have been changed by your work. All right. Being sure to include these 5 ways of demonstrating your brand, Jude creates 3 videos from one simple moment in time. In video 1, he likes to include a history, a pivotal moment, and some behind the scenes. In video 2, he'll cover social proof to show how our brand has impacted others. And that final video, we take the viewer with us to see what the future holds and why they should join our brand as we continue to move mountains bit by bit with little moments. And don't forget the hook. For me, it was the pen, right? Right, for the pens. For you, what is it? What is that one thing different that will get people curious and draw them in? What's really crazy to me about this whole thing is that it only took Jude 1 hour of conversation to get his hook and have enough to build out a complete 3-video storyboard. I just love it when people are really, really good at what they do. And Jude is certainly that. So thank you, Jude, for sharing the secret sauce of what you do and how you create engaging video content. We appreciate you. So what do you think? Can you take what Jude has taught and make it something amazing? He told us designers have done it, and don't think it has to be 3 20-minute videos. Why not just start with 1 video and make it a few minutes? Choose one simple, seemingly mundane moment, find the genius in it, and show it to the world. All right? Now, keep in mind that Jude has a list of questions that will help you go deeper into finding the special stories that you have to tell. And the link for that will be in the show notes, okay? It's judecharles.co/DDP book 3. But the link is in the show notes, okay? I can't wait to have Jude back to share with us how to use our videos to market our business, right? As he says, turn skeptics into raving fans by showing them who you are. I love it. Thank you tons, Jude, for joining us today. You always wow me 100 times over. I just like my mouth wide open while I'm talking to you. And I appreciate the rest of you for joining me every week. I really do value and appreciate that you show up. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.